Greetings, YouTube. Get some sparkly lights on the background. I like those. Recently, my wife and I watched the film What We Do in the Shadows. She had wanted to see it. Um, and it's a dark comedy dealing with vampires. And as a dark comedy, it was funny and it was dark. But if you step back and you look at it from the perspective of a person that isn't a morally bankrupt vampire, it's it's horrible. Um, because the premise of the film is that there is a film crew who is following these vampires around to learn about their lives. We're supposed to get this, this little secret viewing into the lives of the vampires. Um, and we know how human they are, the daily problems they have, things like that. But the thing is that the crew just films the vampires murdering people. In fact, they know beforehand that the vampires are going to murder people, and then they just silently go along with it. That's horrible. Really horrible. But then I got started to think about it. If I was a vampire in the modern world, from their GM's perspective, what would I do differently? Because over the course of the film, they do have some problems. They have some run-ins with the law. One of their members, who's reported to have been like 8,000 years old, and like of the Narasfatu. Now I can't say that word. I don't know why I suddenly can't say that word. I was looking at it this morning. But yeah, he's like the old style ugly vampires before they got all cute and adorable. And thankfully, none of them sparkled. I will give them that. None of the vampires in this film sparkled. Nosferatu, that's the word I'm looking for. And he eventually gets killed, spoilers, because somebody breaks into the basement where he lives, where his tomb is, and lets the sunlight in. Now, if I'm 8,000 years old and a vampire, I'm probably going to be living on my own island, or at least some fortress someplace, or at the bare minimum in a refurbished nuclear missile silo where I've got guards around it and things. I am not going to just let myself be killed in a basement because some guy kicked a basement window in. But for some strange reason, if I was going to live in a basement of a suburban home, or an urban home, I think it would probably fall into the category of urban home, I would make sure that there were no windows anywhere near me, and I would have had them all bricked up completely. And I would have had all the windows reinforced, on the ones that you have to show because they're on the public area, reinforced so they couldn't just be broken, with heavy grade bulletproof glass, and blinds that completely seal the windows. And for some strange reason, these folks didn't understand how to use a clock, because he actually peeked out the window to see if the sun was still up. They published sunrise and sunset charts, information, which got me thinking about how the vampires interact with the world and how technology interacts with vampires, which is where this video idea came from. So the vampires are of the apparently must kill their victim. They just can't drink their blood. They kill their victims, which is weird. They like virgins because they're sexists and fully endorse the whole bullshit that is the concept of virginity. Yeah, just horrible. But they are vulnerable to silver. Holy symbols can keep them at bay. Holy water hurts them. They don't have reflections. Interestingly, their clothing is invisible, but objects they hold float in the air because they're invisible, but the object is not invisible. So why is the clothing not visible? I could completely understand why the vampire wouldn't be visible. Okay, the mythology is that it's a magical world. These are magical creatures. But yeah, the magical concept is that you can't see, they have no reflection because they have no souls. Now, the idea that vampires have been around for a really long time is horrible bullshit. I've talked about this in which is one of the reasons I despise the World of Darkness so much. The only version I liked was Monty Cook's, because that was a World of Darkness that happened now. So one moment there was no World of Darkness, and the next there was. So from that moment forward, we now have a history full of ghosts and werewolves and vampires and yada yada yada. But if those things are supposed to have existed in our past, they can't, because our past has none of these things. And if you add them in, it ceases to be our past. And it wouldn't have any of the history of our world. The moment the supernatural becomes as tangible as it is in this world of darkness, bingo, history ends. And a new history starts. And none of our cultures, none of our languages, none of our nations, none of our religions, none of those things would exist. It would be a completely different world. So you can't just take our world and then slap vampires and werewolves and what have you on it. And this film does that. But again, it's supposed to be light comedy, but it isn't, because these people are morally bankrupt. They murder folks to survive and think nothing of it. But if you don't have a reflection, why aren't you using a video camera? We see them visible on video cameras. So video cameras pick them up. So if you have a video camera, you just set up a video camera and a big monitor and you have a mirror. Bingo, you can look at yourself. Excellent. Now you know what you look like before you go out for the evening to go murder someone. Can they use smartphones? I mean, here's my smartphone, but guess what I've got? I'm alive. So my capacitive screen will pick up the fact that I have an electrical impulse. Vampires don't. They're dead. So they probably can't use touchscreens. Maybe they're big BlackBerry fans. Why are they not just harvesting? Like, bleeding some people? A small retinue of folks maybe, or picking up drunk people and feeding on them and not killing them. Much easier to hide yourself. Because in the course of the film, we learn that in this one metropolitan area of New Zealand, which is where the film takes place, there are like 30 to 40 vampires. Now, they don't actually talk about how often vampires have to feed. I know that was in Cyberpunk 2020 where they had a supplement that dealt with vampires? The older the vampire was, the less often they had to feed, which kind of made sense to me. I liked the way that was. That your power becomes less and less dependent on the blood of others as your power grows in other ways. So the ones that are really old might only have to feed once a year, and that was often a volunteer, someone that wanted to be a vampire themselves or wanted to donate their blood to someone that they worshipped essentially as a superior. Again, vampires often control people. They actually played up that in the film too. Now, it wasn't a bad dark comedy, mind you, but if you start thinking about it for a second, it becomes morally bankrupt and it makes no sense. So why do you have to kill? Why can't you just bleed? Their interaction with technology was also very consistent. But if I were going to have a world with vampires, which was absurd because it doesn't work, I'd want to know things like, can they use smartphones? Why aren't they using video cameras? Why didn't they have video cameras all around their friggin' building? Why didn't they have better security? Why didn't they have guards or guard dogs? Or something. None of them work. They have money. One of them's 8,000 years old. He's probably really wealthy. They didn't have to live in this old, painted lady in a city without any kind of security. And if you have a house like this and you keep it well maintained, people are not going to blink at all if you have security around it. And only one of them has, a human Renfield, who he eventually loses because he doesn't take care of her very well. But why only one of them? And they have one human friend who is awesome. Stu is awesome. Because not only was in the film, is he supposed to be this kind of somewhat awkward techie nerd. He's a techie nerd in real life. He wasn't even an actor. He eventually got the job as acting because someone liked his look. Because he was originally hired just to do tech support for the film. Which made me laugh when I found that out. But Stu's awesome. But it shows the problems of having a human friend. Just the problem is if suddenly, if you turn into a vampire, you can't eat French fries anymore. And that's horrible. I suddenly couldn't eat French fries. I'd be really upset. I wouldn't want to be a vampire. Really, I wouldn't. But if I were one, I'd be a much better vampire than these folks. I'd learn real quick how to make sure that I was safe from all the trepidations of the world around me. And I would take advantage of my abilities, and I wouldn't kill. Well, killing is immoral, but it also means it's going to be really hard to hide the bodies. Because if you get a population of 30, 40 vampires, and say they're only killing, say, even if they're only killing one person a month, that's 40 bodies a month. Even if you were in a city like Mumbai or New York, 40 bodies a month with no blood in them is going to look suspicious. I don't know what the population density was of the city they're in, but I can guarantee you it could not handle 40 bodies a month. And I don't know how often they have to kill. They didn't really nail that down. The film takes place over months. I mean, because it's little snippets of their life kind of thing. Now, it is an entertaining little film, so go watch it. But I think it shows that world building is never very well done by film writers. I don't understand why. I am not the only geek out there that thinks of these things. We are not hard to find. And it doesn't seem that it would be difficult to just grab one and have them be their resident geek. Heck, just pay them scale. They'd probably do it. Just for the credit of having worked on a film. And look for all the holes that are in their plot. Because if you get rid of those holes and your world building is consistent, your film will be better. So let's talk about vampires and technology. How vampires can use it to their advantage, how they can interface with it. For example, can they use smartphones? And how technology can be used against them. For example, they may not have, they may not be alive, but they can still leave DNA behind. They can still leave fingerprints behind. So there's going to be more evidence of them in the real world today than there would have been, 400 years ago. They're still going to show up in video cameras. They're still going to get spotted, like closed circuit television systems for security. So there are all kinds of things that are going to make life difficult for vampires in the modern era. Oh yeah, one other thing. The whole have to be invited in thing. I get that if it's a private residence. But if you're in a bar, that's not a private residence. That's a public place. You shouldn't have to be invited in to a bar or a club. You just walk in. Private residence, yes. If there's an apartment upstairs over the bar or the club, you'd have to be invited in there because it's private. Someone's personal domain. But if it's a public place, like a pub or a club, no. You should just be able to walk right in without any worries about it. So they actually had to be invited into a club, which seems strange to me. Yeah, I know it was comedic, but it seems strange to me. All right, so let's talk about vampires and technology and the absurdity of trying to fit them into the modern world and see if we can come up with anything that makes more sense.